The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on Highway 285, creating shimmering mirages that danced across the asphalt like liquid silver. It was July 15, 2020, and the temperature gauge in Sheriff Maria Rodriguez's patrol car read 104 degrees Fahrenheit. She had been driving these desolate stretches of West Texas for over 15 years, but something about this particular afternoon felt different, heavier, more ominous. Her radio crackled to life, breaking the monotonous hum of the air conditioning. "Sheriff Rodriguez, we've got a situation out on Ranch Road 1776, about 20 miles east of your current position." Maria grabbed the handset, her weathered hands steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "Go ahead, dispatch. We've got a missing person report. Trucker named John Barnes, 43 years old, was supposed to deliver a load of cattle feed to the Morrison Ranch yesterday evening. He never showed up. His wife called it in this morning when he didn't come home." Maria's jaw tightened. John Barnes wasn't just any trucker. He was one of the most reliable drivers in the county, known for his punctuality and his deep connection to the land. If John was missing, something was seriously wrong. "Any sign of his rig?" she asked, already making a U-turn toward Ranch Road 1776. "That's the strange part, Sheriff. We found his 18-wheeler parked perfectly on the shoulder about 15 miles from the Morrison Ranch. Engine was still running, cargo intact, but no sign of John anywhere." The knot in Maria's stomach tightened. She pressed harder on the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb as the landscape blurred past. Endless stretches of mesquite, prickly pear cactus, and sun-bleached earth that seemed to swallow secrets whole. 20 minutes later, Maria pulled up behind John's massive Peterbilt truck. The sight that greeted her was indeed puzzling. The truck sat perfectly positioned on the shoulder, hazard lights still blinking rhythmically. The driver's door hung open, and the diesel engine continued its steady rumble, as if John had simply stepped out for a moment and would return any second. Deputy Tom Wilson was already on scene, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible confusion. "Sheriff, I've been here for an hour and I can't make sense of it. Look at this." He led her to the driver's side of the cab. John's wallet sat on the dashboard. His cell phone was plugged into the charger, and his coffee mug, still half full, rested in the cup holder. His logbook lay open to the previous day's entry, written in his characteristic neat handwriting. "It's like he just vanished into thin air," Tom muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Maria climbed into the cab, her trained eyes scanning every detail. The seat was adjusted to John's height, the mirrors positioned exactly as he would have them. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, nothing to indicate violence or foul play. But something else caught her attention, a faint smell that didn't belong. "Tom, do you smell that?" The deputy climbed up beside her and inhaled deeply. "Yeah, it's sweet, almost like flowers, but not quite." Maria nodded, filing the observation away. In her years of law enforcement, she had learned that the smallest details often held the biggest clues. She climbed down from the cab and began walking the perimeter of the truck, looking for any sign of where John might have gone. The ground around the truck was hard-packed dirt and gravel, not ideal for preserving footprints. But about 50 yards from the truck, Maria noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. There, in a small patch of softer earth near a cluster of mesquite trees, were hoofprints. "Tom, come look at this." The deputy jogged over, his boots crunching on the dry vegetation. "Horse tracks?" "Fresh ones," Maria confirmed, kneeling down to examine them more closely. "And they're deep, which means the horse was carrying weight. But here's what's strange. There are no human footprints leading to or from these tracks. They followed the hoofprints for about 100 yards, before they simply stopped at a large flat rock. Beyond the rock, the ground was too hard to show any tracks at all. "This doesn't make sense," Tom said, scratching his head. "How does a trucker end up on horseback in the middle of nowhere? And where did the horse come from?" Maria stood up, dusting off her knees. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. "Let's expand the search. Call in additional units and set up a perimeter. I want every inch of this area searched before dark." As the hours passed, more deputies arrived, along with volunteers from the local ranching community. They combed through the brush, called John's name until their voices were hoarse, and used tracking dogs that seemed as confused as the humans. The dogs would pick up John's scent at the truck, follow it to where the hoofprints began, and then lose it completely. By sunset, they had found nothing else. No additional clues, no sign of John Barnes, and no explanation for the mysterious horse tracks that seemed to lead nowhere. As Maria stood beside John's abandoned truck, watching the last light of day fade behind the distant mountains, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger and more complex than a simple missing person case. The radio in her patrol car crackled again. "Sheriff, this is dispatch. We've got John Barnes's wife on the line. She says she needs to tell you something important about her husband, something she didn't mention in the initial report." Maria walked back to her car, the weight of the day's discoveries heavy on her shoulders. Whatever Sarah Barnes had to tell her, she had a feeling it was going to make this case even more complicated. "Put her through," Maria said, settling into the driver's seat as the first stars began to appear in the darkening Texas sky. Sarah Barnes sat across from Sheriff Rodriguez in the cramped office of the Pecos County Sheriff's Department, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under her eyes, emphasizing the worry lines that had deepened considerably since her husband's disappearance 2 days ago. "I should have told you this from the beginning," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hoped he would just come home and it wouldn't matter." Maria leaned forward, her notepad ready. "Take your time, Sarah. Whatever it is, it might help us find John." Sarah took a shaky breath. 3 weeks ago, John started having these dreams, vivid dreams about a wild mustang, a beautiful black horse with white markings on its face. In the dreams, the horse would appear to him while he was driving, always in the same area where you found his truck. "Did he tell you anything else about these dreams?" "He said the horse seemed to be calling to him, like it needed his help." John has always had a connection with animals, especially horses. When he was younger, before he became a trucker, he worked on his grandfather's ranch breaking wild horses. Sarah paused, wiping away a tear. The dreams became so frequent that he started taking that route more often, even when it wasn't the most direct path to his destinations. Maria made notes, trying to piece together this new information with what they had found at the scene. "Sarah, did John ever mention seeing this horse while he was awake, during his actual drives?" "That's what I was afraid to tell you," Sarah admitted. 2 days before he disappeared, he called me from that exact stretch of road. He was excited, almost breathless. He said he had seen the horse from his dreams, and it was real. It was standing in a clearing about a quarter mile from the road, and when it saw his truck, it didn't run away like wild horses usually do. Instead, it seemed to be waiting for him. The pieces were starting to form a picture, though not one that made complete sense yet. Maria closed her notepad and looked directly at Sarah. "Do you think John might have stopped to investigate this horse? I know my husband, Sheriff. If he thought an animal needed help, especially a horse, he would risk anything to help it. That's just who John is." After Sarah left, Maria sat alone in her office, staring at the case file that was growing thicker by the hour, but no clearer in its meaning. She had requested aerial support from the Texas Department of Public Safety, and tomorrow morning they would begin a systematic search of the area using drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystal-clear sky that made everything in Texas seem infinite. Maria met the drone operator, a young tech specialist named Marcus Chen, at the command post they had set up near where John's truck had been found. "We'll start with a grid pattern," Marcus explained, adjusting the controls on his equipment. "The thermal imaging will pick up any heat signatures, and the high-definition cameras will give us detailed visuals of anything unusual." The drone lifted off with a quiet whir, its cameras immediately transmitting images to the monitors at the command post. For the first 2 hours, they saw nothing but the expected wildlife, a few deer, some wild boar, and the occasional coyote. Then, at 10:47 a.m., the thermal imaging detected something unusual. "Sheriff, you need to see this," Marcus called out, his voice tight with excitement and confusion. Maria hurried over to the monitor. On the screen, about 3 miles from where John's truck had been found, the thermal imaging showed a large heat signature in what appeared to be a natural depression in the landscape, hidden by a thick grove of live oak trees. "Can you get a visual on that?" Maria asked. Marcus switched to the high-definition camera and maneuvered the drone lower. What they saw on the screen made both of them fall silent. In the hidden clearing stood a magnificent black horse with distinctive white markings on its face, exactly as Sarah had described from John's dreams. But that wasn't what made them stare in stunned silence. Next to the horse, sitting calmly on a fallen log, as if he had been waiting for them to find him, was John Barnes. "Is he?" Maria started to ask. "He's alive," Marcus confirmed, pointing to the thermal reading. "Definitely alive and showing normal body temperature." Maria grabbed her radio. "All units, we have located John Barnes. He appears to be unharmed. Coordinates are—" She rattled off the GPS location while Marcus kept the drone focused on the clearing. On the screen, they watched as John looked up at the drone, stood slowly, and waved. The horse beside him remained calm, as if the mechanical buzzing overhead was nothing unusual. "How the hell did he get there?" Maria muttered. "That's rough terrain, and it's at least a 3-hour hike from where we found his truck." The rescue team reached the clearing 45 minutes later. Maria was among the first to arrive, and what she found was even more puzzling than what they had seen from the drone footage. John Barnes sat beside the black horse, his hand gently stroking its neck. He looked tired but unharmed, his clothes dusty but not torn. When he saw the rescue team approaching, he smiled, a peaceful, almost serene expression that seemed oddly out of place given the circumstances. "John," Maria called out as she approached carefully, not wanting to spook the horse. "Are you all right? We've been looking for you for 2 days." 2 days? John looked genuinely surprised. "It feels like I just got here a few hours ago." The horse, which Maria had expected to bolt at the sight of so many people, remained perfectly calm. It was indeed a beautiful animal, a wild mustang with intelligent dark eyes and the white facial markings that Sarah had described. "John, can you tell me what happened? How did you get here?" John looked at the horse, then back at Maria, his expression thoughtful. "I was driving my usual route when I saw her standing by the road. She looked hurt, like she might have been limping. I couldn't just drive past, so I stopped to check on her. And then she led me here. I know that sounds strange, but she would walk a few steps, then stop and look back at me, like she wanted me to follow. The walk seemed to take no time at all, and when we got here—" John paused, looking around the clearing, as if seeing it for the first time. "When we got here, I felt like I needed to stay with her for a while, like she needed the company." Maria exchanged glances with the other members of the rescue team. John's story didn't explain how he had covered such difficult terrain so quickly, or why he seemed to have lost track of time so completely. "John, your truck was found with the engine running and your personal belongings inside. Do you remember leaving it?" For the first time, John looked confused. "My truck? I remember stopping, but I don't remember leaving the engine running. I always turn off the engine." As they prepared to escort John back to civilization, Maria noticed something that made her pause. In the soft earth around the fallen log where John had been sitting, there were no footprints leading into the clearing. Just like at the truck, it was as if he had simply appeared there. The horse watched them prepare to leave, showing no signs of wanting to follow or flee. As John stood to go, he placed his hand on the animal's neck one more time. "Thank you," he whispered to the horse, and Maria could have sworn she saw understanding in the animal's eyes. As they made their way back through the rough terrain toward the vehicles, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were leaving the clearing with more questions than answers, and somewhere behind them, she was certain, the black horse with white markings continued to watch their departure with those intelligent, knowing eyes. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell had been practicing emergency medicine in West Texas for over 20 years, but she had never encountered a case quite like John Barnes. As she completed her examination in the small medical facility in Fort Stockton, she found herself reviewing the test results for the 3rd time, hoping she had missed something that would explain the anomalies. "Physically, he's in perfect health," she told Sheriff Rodriguez, who'd been waiting anxiously for the medical report. Better than perfect, actually. "His blood pressure is ideal, his heart rate is that of someone 20 years younger, and his hydration levels are excellent, despite supposedly spending 2 days in the desert without water." Maria frowned. What about his mental state? Any signs of confusion, memory loss, or psychological trauma? "That's where it gets interesting," Dr. Hartwell said, pulling up John's brain scan on her computer. "I ordered a CT scan to check for any head injuries that might explain his memory gaps. Not only is there no sign of trauma, but his brain activity shows patterns I've never seen before, extremely high levels of activity in the areas associated with peace and contentment." Meaning? Meaning that neurologically, John Barnes is in a state of profound calm and well-being. Whatever happened to him out there, it wasn't traumatic. If anything, it appears to have been therapeutic. The doctor paused, pulling up additional test results on her screen. "There's something else that's unusual. His vitamin D levels are significantly elevated, as if he'd been exposed to intense sunlight for weeks, yet he shows no signs of sun damage or dehydration. His muscle tone has actually improved, and there are trace amounts of minerals in his bloodstream that are typically found in natural spring water, minerals that aren't present in our local water supply. Meanwhile, in the hospital's family waiting area, John sat with his wife Sarah, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory. The reunion had been emotional, but also confusing for both of them. "I remember seeing the horse by the road," John said for the dozenth time, his voice patient despite the repetition. "She was beautiful, Sarah, just like in the dreams. But when I got out of the truck to check on her, everything after that is fuzzy, like trying to remember a really good dream after you wake up." Sarah held his hand tightly, noticing how much calmer and more centered her husband seemed. Even his voice had a different quality, deeper, more peaceful. "The important thing is that you're safe. But John, the sheriff said they found you 3 miles from your truck, in terrain that would take hours to cross on foot. How do you explain that?" John shook his head slowly. "I can't. All I know is that being with that horse felt right, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And Sarah, I keep having these flashes of memory, not visual memories, but feelings. I remember the sound of water running, even though there's no water source in that area. I remember the smell of wildflowers, but it's the wrong season for most blooms." Sheriff Rodriguez joined them, carrying a folder thick with reports and photographs. Behind her walked Dr. James Morrison, a local veterinarian who had been consulted about the mysterious horse sightings. "John, I need to ask you a few more questions if you're up to it," Maria said. "Of course, Sheriff." Maria sat down across from them, with Dr. Morrison taking a seat nearby. "We've been investigating the area where we found you. That clearing has some interesting history. According to county records, it was the site of a natural spring that dried up during the drought of 1956. Local ranchers used to bring their horses there to drink." Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "I've been researching the historical records of wild horse populations in this area. What's fascinating is that the spring you mentioned was known locally as healing waters. Native American tribes and early settlers believed it had restorative properties for both humans and animals." "Okay," John said, not sure where this was leading. "More specifically," Maria continued, "it was a gathering place for wild mustangs. The last documented sighting of wild horses in that area was in 1963, when a small herd was relocated to a preserve in New Mexico. John, the horse you described, the black mustang with white facial markings, matches the description of a mare that was never captured. She was the leader of that herd, and according to the old-timers, she was known for her intelligence and her protective nature toward other animals." Dr. Morrison added, "I spoke with several retired ranchers who remember that particular mare. They called her Guardian, because she had an unusual habit of appearing when animals or people were in distress. There are documented accounts of her leading lost cattle back to their herds and guiding stranded travelers to safety." Sarah looked confused. "But Sheriff, that was almost 60 years ago. That horse would be long dead." "Exactly," Maria said. "Which brings me to something else we discovered." She opened her folder and pulled out several photographs taken by the drone. "These are images of the clearing from yesterday, taken about an hour after we brought John back. The photographs showed the same peaceful clearing, the fallen log where John had been sitting, and the soft earth around it. But there was no sign of any horse, and more importantly, there were no hoofprints in the dirt." "I don't understand," John said, studying the photos. "She was right there. You saw her on the drone footage." "We saw something," Maria admitted. "But when our tech specialist reviewed the original footage, he found some anomalies. The thermal signature was inconsistent, sometimes showing a large animal, sometimes showing nothing at all in the same location." Dr. Morrison pulled out his own folder. "I've been collecting reports from truckers, ranchers, and travelers who've had encounters in that area over the past 30 years. There are 17 documented sightings of a black horse with white markings, always appearing during times of crisis or distress. What's remarkable is that the descriptions are identical across all these years, suggesting either the same horse, which is impossible, or a phenomenon that defies conventional explanation." Dr. Hartwell, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the conversation. "There's something else you should know. John's blood work showed traces of compounds that we typically associate with deep meditative states, naturally occurring chemicals that the brain produces during profound relaxation or spiritual experiences. But there's more. We found microscopic traces of plant matter in his clothing that don't match any vegetation currently growing in that area. However, they do match samples from the botanical surveys conducted in the 1950s, when the spring was still active. John looked from the doctor to the sheriff to his wife. "Are you all saying that I imagined the horse?" "Not imagined," Maria said carefully, "but maybe experienced something that doesn't fit into our usual understanding of reality." Over the following days, as John recovered at home and tried to return to his normal routine, more pieces of the puzzle emerged. Other truckers who regularly drove that stretch of highway came forward with their own stories. Brief sightings of a black horse that seemed to appear and disappear without warning, always in times when the drivers were stressed or facing personal difficulties. Marcus Chen, the drone operator, conducted his own investigation of the footage. What he found was both fascinating and unsettling. Frame-by-frame analysis showed that the horse appeared to be there in some shots and completely absent in others, with no logical pattern to explain the discrepancy. "It's like the camera was picking up something that exists in a different dimension," he told Maria during their final meeting about the case. "I've been doing this work for 8 years and I've never seen anything like it. But here's what's really strange. When I enhanced the audio from the drone footage, there are sounds that shouldn't be there. Running water, wind chimes, and what sounds like distant music. None of these sounds were audible during the actual flight." The local newspaper picked up the story, and within days, John found himself contacted by researchers from universities across the country. Paranormal investigators, psychologists, and even physicists wanted to study his experience. But John politely declined most interviews, feeling that too much analysis might somehow diminish what had happened to him. 2 weeks after John's disappearance and rescue, he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He sold his trucking business and used the money to purchase a small ranch near the area where he had been found. "I can't explain what happened to me out there," he told Sarah as they stood on the porch of their new home, looking out over the landscape that had somehow called to him. "But I know that I'm supposed to be here. This land needs someone to care for it, and maybe I need it just as much." Sarah, who had initially been worried about the dramatic life change, found herself feeling the same inexplicable pull toward the area. "It does feel right, doesn't it? And John, I've noticed something. Since you came back, you seemed different, more at peace with yourself than I've seen you in years." John nodded. "It's like something inside me was healed out there. The stress, the constant worry about deadlines and schedules, it's all gone. I feel connected to something larger than myself." He paused, looking thoughtful. "And who knows? Maybe someday she'll come back." As if summoned by his words, a movement in the distance caught their attention. There, silhouetted against the setting sun on a ridge about a mile away, stood the unmistakable figure of a horse. Even at that distance, they could make out the distinctive white markings on its face. The horse stood motionless for several long moments, as if acknowledging their presence, then turned and disappeared over the ridge. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered. John smiled, the same peaceful expression that had puzzled everyone since his return. "I see her sometimes. Not often, but when I need to remember that some things in this world are bigger than our understanding of them." Within months of moving to the ranch, John discovered he had developed an almost supernatural ability to work with animals. Word spread throughout the county about the former trucker who could calm the most aggressive bulls, heal injured wildlife, and locate lost livestock with uncanny accuracy. Veterinarians began referring difficult cases to him, and his reputation grew. Sheriff Rodriguez officially closed the case, filing it under missing person located safe, with a note that the circumstances remained unexplained, but she kept copies of all the reports, the photographs, and the witness statements in a separate file, labeled simply Unexplained Phenomena. Years later, when other strange incidents occurred in that part of Texas, Maria would pull out that file and remember the case of John Barnes and the horse that may or may not have existed. She never found a rational explanation for what happened, but she did find something perhaps more valuable, a reminder that the world still held mysteries that couldn't be solved with logic and technology alone. John Barnes continued to live on his ranch, becoming known throughout the county as someone who had an almost supernatural ability to calm troubled animals and help lost travelers find their way. And on clear evenings, when the Texas sky stretched endlessly overhead, Neighbors would sometimes report seeing a man and a black horse walking together across the landscape, both of them appearing to be exactly where they belonged. The truth about what happened during those missing 2 days remained John's secret, locked away in the part of his memory that felt more like a beautiful dream than reality. But the peace he had found in that hidden clearing stayed with him, a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that take us not to a new place, but to a new understanding of ourselves. If this story touched your heart and made you think about the mysteries that still exist in our world, I'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you questioning what you thought you knew about reality. I'm especially curious to know where you're watching from today. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're joining us from. It's amazing to connect with viewers from all around the world who share a fascination with these unexplained events. Remember, we bring you a new story every single day, each one carefully researched and designed to make you think, feel, and wonder about the world around us. Whether it's mysterious disappearances, unexplained phenomena, or heartwarming tales of human resilience, there's always something new waiting for you here. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode, and if you enjoyed John Barnes's incredible story, share it with someone who appreciates a good mystery. Until tomorrow, keep your eyes open for the extraordinary hiding in the ordinary, and remember that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that turn out to be true. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another fascinating story that will challenge everything you think you know about our world.